Hey, what's up guys, Lightsaber Samurai here. I'm back again for another video, and first off I gotta give a quick shout out to Ian from Budget Gaming as well as Scott, who is one half of Retro Rivals. They both tagged me late last year to do a top 10, my favorite top 10 video games of all time, and I tried to make that video like several times, literally like the past month and a half. I was toiling through all my games trying to break down the list. I know what I know what a few of them are, but I just couldn't get a full list at the end of the day. So what I'm going to do instead is go through my top 10 for various systems, and then we will culminate it with a top 10 favorite games of all time, and that should help me narrow down my list. So without further ado, let's talk about it. Okay, so starting out the list with a game that came out in 2000, and this was around the time where survival horror was really popular on the system thanks to our friends at Capcom. It had a lot of games like Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3. It had Dino Crisis. Other companies followed suit with games like Parasite Eve 2 that very much followed the formula, and EDOS was no different, but in my opinion, I think they had the best game of all. And starting off at number 10, we got to talk about Fear Effect. This was a game that really, for me, revolutionized the genre. I mean, as far as a lot of the mechanics were the same as far as the perspectives, the pre-rendered backgrounds, the static screens, things like that, but this added a little bit of flair, especially in the graphics. This is one of the first games that I remember being like actually cell shaded, and that would be followed up with a lot of games in the future like Jet Grind Radio if you're on the Dreamcast, other games like Cell Damage and things like that. So for a while, cell shading was the thing to do, and I feel like Fear Effect was the first game I remember to do that. Another thing that I really liked about the graphics was a lot of the movement. It was pre-rendered graphics, but they had a lot of like real-time, like 3D effects like smoke and lights in the background, and it just made the world feel a lot more alive. In this, you play the game as a bounty hunter slash mercenary named Rin, and her crew. You've been hired by a Chinese crime lord to get his daughter back. The plan was to find his daughter and then ransom her yourself for a larger reward, and thus you set off through Hong Kong and all over China eventually. I mean, the story takes a dark turn, and you will find yourself literally going to hell itself to rescue this young girl. We talked about the gameplay mechanics, very similar to a lot of the survival horror games at the time. They did add a few things though. For instance, with the combat, get a nice variety of weapons. You can do stealth attacks in this, so if you can crouch down and slow walk if you have a melee weapon. If you creep up on an enemy unsuspected, the crosshair will turn red, and then you can either shoot them or bludgeon them or stab them in a single hit. That was cool that they added that little bit of stealth element into the game. They also added dual wielding into the game, and that's something we wouldn't see from the Resident Evil series until like Code Veronica a few years later. So while they did, take some cues from that, they also innovated in their own way, and I always like when games do that. This is a 4-disc game, but it's not super long just because there's so much going into the graphics. I feel like that they had to make the game a lot shorter as a result, and they didn't have the space, so basically each scene or each level takes place on a single disc. And with that being said, it's still a pretty long game all in all, and I had a blast with this. I pick this up and play this every couple of years or so. If you've never tried Fear Effect or its sequel, Retro Helix, you definitely need to get those. Those are peak horror, survival horror games on the system, in my opinion, and again, one of my favorite games on the system. Okay, coming in at number 9 is Wildnine, and this is definitely a hidden gem on the system. This is a 2.5D polygon platformer by the makers of Earthworm Jim. And so we actually got a 3D Earthworm Jim on the N64, and I remember playing that game and thinking it was garbage. So if you want a good polygon 3D type-ish Earthworm Jim, I suggest this game. I don't remember the plot of this at all. You're basically a dude trying to stop an evil dude or a corporation or something like that from taking over the world. You don't play it for the story. In this game, you get a weapon, I believe, called the Mangler. It's like a telekinetic grappling hook that you shoot out and you can grab enemies, and that's really where the fun begins. The weapon itself doesn't do any physical damage to them, but once you have a hold of them, then you can slam them around back and forth until they explode. The environments are set out. There are tons of different traps and hazards in the environments themselves, and so you can catch them with the grappling hook and throw them into certain traps. There's a lot of traps like the spinning spikes on the ground that you can't walk over, but if you're able to grab one of these enemies and throw them into the spikes, you'll see that, you know, it kind of ground and stop because their body parts are all caught up in the spikes, and so then you can use their mangled bodies to walk across the spikes unharmed, things like that. You do also get some sub weapons like missiles and other projectile weapons like that you can fire, but me, I primarily, you know, just use those only when I have to. It's usually just slamming them around and throwing them into different traps. The way you can torture your enemies in this is absolutely, it's sadistic and hilarious, and you know, decent graphics for the time. The graphics are a little bit dark, but that's to be expected with the OG PlayStation. A lot of games like that, but I mean, again, this game has some pretty cool music as well, some funny sound effects, and this one is still going for pretty cheap, so this isn't one of those like super expensive games. Now again, nobody seems to remember or talk about this game, but if you want a fantastic platformer, I put this over, what's the other one? Klonoa. You know, that game is super expensive and everybody likes Klonoa. Wildnine beats Klonoa 11 times out of 10 in my book, so if you don't have it, definitely pick that one up. That's number 9 on the list. Okay, moving on to number 8, and number 8 is special for a number of reasons. Most importantly, this was the first PlayStation game that we owned ourselves, and so I had played PlayStation games, you know, at kiosk, at Target, you know, in the years leading up to when we finally got ours. So games like Tomb Raider, the original Tomb Raider, Nights in the Dreams, those were some of my first experience playing like 3D polygonal games. But on the PlayStation, the very first game that we had ourselves was, in fact, Ninja Shadow of Darkness. Now, in Christmas, we got this and Tomb Raider 3, but this was the game that intrigued me more, and oddly enough, it's from the creators of Tomb Raider 3. Again, our good fellas at Eidos and Core made this game, and I've talked about it before. Definitely a hidden gem. This is kind of like a 3D action adventure, beat 'em up, some platforming sections, which honestly are kind of frustrating and not that good because it's an early 3D game, but you play as this ninja who's out to take out this warlord who sold his soul to demons in order to break this stalemate and unite the country, kind of Nobunaga style. So there is a little light puzzle solving in this. You'll have to find keys and unlock gates and things like that. And in most case scenarios, though, you'll enter an area and have to beat everybody up before the key appears. But it's a fantastic game. It had really good graphics for the time. I still think hold up well enough, especially in some of the brighter stages like the cloud levels or the beach. You get a bunch of different weapons from, you know, you can get a scythe, you can get a sword, you can get an ultimate sword, some other weapons in there as well. You get a ton of different magical spells. Again, this had a lot of variety for me at the time. It has some nice colorful graphics at the time that really drew me in, and this was a great way to start out my PlayStation journey. Again, as of right now, the making of this video, this is still a game that can be had for like 20 bucks or less. So if you don't have Ninja Shadow of Darkness, this is a game gameplay wise that definitely holds up. I definitely recommend getting it. That's why it's number 8 on the list. Going on to number 7 on the list, and I had the unenviable task of choosing a fighting game on the PlayStation, and the PlayStation was, I mean, it was definitely a good system for fighting games. Not as good as the Saturn, but really the Saturn had it when it came to 2D fighting games, and so we got some awesome 2D ports on the PlayStation. Again, not quite as good, but still fantastic. You know, you got the Street Fighter Alpha series, games like Third Strike. The first Marvel vs. Capcom was on the PlayStation. Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, which is some of my favorites. You got the Street Fighter EX games. You had Tekken 3, and then you had this early game by Namco that came out, a port of the arcade version. This is Soul Blade on the PlayStation, and again, it was really hard to choose between this and Tekken 3 in particular. Play as one of, I think, 8 to 10 characters. You're out to acquire the legendary Soul Edge weapon, which is set to grant the wielder unlimited power. And so you got a lot of different characters, so a lot of different types of fighting styles. You got Mitsurugi, who's like the samurai. You've got Lei Long, who's like the nunchuck guy. Rock, who wields the giant axe. Sophatia, and you know, a bunch of other characters. And so you'll definitely find a character that you like in this game. Again, this is a game that came out in 1996, and the graphics are absolutely fantastic. Moves at a nice frame rate with a fantastic orchestral score. So that's why this takes the number 7 spot. My favorite fighting game on the system, Soul Blade. Okay, moving on to number 6 now, and this one also is important because this is the game that got me into first-person shooters. Again, we had games that had come out before, like Doom and a bunch of other stuff, but I wasn't really an adopter of the 4th generation, so a lot of 16-bit games I just didn't play or care about. And I mean, Doom was cool for what it was at the time, but it's still like, again, like really when we got into the 5th generation, where we really started to see some first-person shooters that were really, you know, giving us the full like 3D, like immersive experience. And while everybody had the fantastic GoldenEye on the N64, my intro to it on the PlayStation was Medal of Honor, and the Medal of Honor series is fantastic. This is brought to us by DreamWorks Interactive and Electronic Arts, and in this game you play as Jimmy Patterson. He's an OSS agent. He's dropped behind enemy lines on the eve of the D-Day invasion, and so you'll go through a bunch of these kind of like covert secret agent style missions in World War II Europe, and you know, kind of, you know, derail the Nazi war machine, you know, from the shadows. And so this game at the time was fantastic. You had authentic weapons like the M1 Garand, the MP40, you know, the 1898 shotgun, things like that. A lot of cool weapons. I remember the AI at this time was fantastic. So things like enemies being able to you know, shoot behind cover and lean out and, you know, try to snipe you from cover, throwing grenades at enemies and watching them kick them back, or if they had attack dogs with them, put the grenade in the attack dog's mouth and have that dog charge you with a grenade in its mouth. The fact that they spoke authentic German, like things like that, it was crazy for 1998, 1999. And so, I mean, you know, you were thinking about, like, you know, I think from that kind of standpoint, the enemies were more fun to fight in Medal of Honor than they were in GoldenEye. The AI, in my opinion, wasn't, you know, as good as what we saw in the, you know, on the PlayStation title. And so it was because of this game that we got games, you know, like the future Medal of Honor series, like the Call of Duty series, as a lot of the original members from this team would go on to create the Call of Duty series. And like I said, it all started with this game. Absolutely fantastic. It's number 6 on the list. Okay, and things are getting real now. We are entering into the top 5. These are the top 5 best games on the PlayStation 1, at least according to me right now. I mean, if you ask me in a year, like, this whole list might be entirely different. But like I said, the PlayStation 1 was groundbreaking for RPGs. This was the system that actually introduced a lot of Western audience to the genre. You had fantastic games like the Final Fantasy series that had some fantastic entries, like Final Fantasy 3, aka Part 6 on the Super Nintendo. We had Shining Force on the Genesis, things like that. But it wasn't until the PlayStation that they ramped it up to the 10th gear. We got a fantastic trilogy of Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 on the PlayStation 1. We had fantastic games like Legend of Legaia, the Lunar games, Silver Star Complete and Eternal Blue Complete. Me personally, though, if I had to pick my absolute favorite RPG of the era, it is Sony's Legend of Dragoon. And this was crazy because this was made by Sony in-house, and this was a game that was set to compete directly with, you know, Final Fantasy VIII at the time was the big RPG on the system. You know, it followed up to 7, you know, it definitely had improved in things like the graphical department and things like that, but still a lot of people like the cast and the story from 7 more. I get it, I do too. But like I said, Legend of Dragoon was on a whole nother level. You play as Dart. It starts off where, you know, your country is embroiled into this war. You end up picking a side and fighting for one of the kings. Again, as the story goes on, you find out that you have this power to turn into, you know, a legendary Dragoon, which is like the Lords of the Dragons and things like that. It opens up into just, you find out that the war and all the conflict in this game is just another chapter in this millennial long struggle between the Dragoons and the Winglies, who's an ancient civilization of human beings who are fighting to retake their claim of the world, things like that. So in this game, like, the thing that drew me to this was the combat system, like the active, like, combo combat system that they had in this was absolutely fantastic. You know, Final Fantasy games at the time were using the active time battle, and, you know, you push a button, he would attack or, you know, use magic or whatever, and then you just kind of sit there and wait for the bar to go back up. And, you know, like I said, I think that works fine, but being able to chain your physical attacks and, you know, turn them into cool combos, it was fun. Learning new combos and, you know, trying to, you know, master those as you went through them. And, you know, like, again, the combat system is fantastic. I didn't like the magic system that much, though, like, be it, you know, the fact that magic spells were items and not actual, like, inherent magic. Things really got crazy, though, when you activate your Dragoon powers, and once you select that, you'll get this cool cinematic where your character turns into the mighty Dragoon, which, you know, it puts on this badass armor and sports some awesome wings. You'll see his weapon kind of change up from there. You'll have your own special kind of Dragoon edition. Editions are what the combos are called, by the way. And so as a Dragoon, you'll have your own special edition slated for that, your own special magic for that, and you get other magic spells as a Dragoon as time goes on. But again, the game was absolutely fantastic. Great graphics and a great you know, great story, cool cast of characters. For whatever reason, this was the only game we got in the series, and, you know, fans have been talking through the years waiting for Sony to give us a Legend of Dragoon 2, and sadly it never happened, but we'll still always have Legend of Dragoon on the PlayStation. Again, in my opinion, my favorite RPG on the system, and that's why it's number 5. Okay, number 4 on the list, we're going into some third-person shooter action, and for me, one of the most fun experiences I had on the PlayStation, I remember this game here, Siphon Filter. So Siphon Filter tells the story of Gabe Logan, who's a member of the secret agency called The Agency, and he's out to capture this group of terrorists who are releasing this biological weapon across the world. This game was compared to a lot of, you know, games in the genre like Metal Gear Solid, for instance, and honestly, it definitely took some cues from Metal Gear Solid, but it you know, performed everything well. It also had its own flavor. This isn't really like a stealth action game like we got in games like Metal Gear Solid. This is a, you know, a straight up third-person action shooter. They had a really cool lock-on system to this where you know, you can run and lock on and shoot at the same time, which is fantastic. It was much faster paced than we got in a lot of third-person shooters at the time. Being able to target enemies behind you as you're running away from them and popping shots at them was great. You had a crazy slew of weapons in this game, from the, you know, the OG 9mm with the silencer to the Desert Eagle. You know, you got things like a combat knife. Actually, the combat knife came in part 2, so not in this game, but you got, you know, like the M16 and a bunch of different type of submachine guns. But my favorite weapon in Siphon Filter as a series was the taser. The taser, you can shoot out long range. It had a crazy range on it. If you can target the enemy, you could shoot it, and once you had them, you can tase them and hold down on the button until they burst into flames, and that was an absolutely killer weapon that can one-shot most enemies. Even if they're wearing a flak jacket, you can target in this game, and target like their head specifically, which again, another thing, headshots in this, before this game came out, there wasn't a lot of games, including Metal Gear Solid, that really acknowledged headshots as a thing. So targeting enemies in the head didn't kill them faster than shooting them in the leg, for instance. And so being able to pop off headshots gave you just a slight extra layer of, tactics when it came to, how you dealt with enemies. Again, this game is absolutely fantastic. Definitely one of my top 5, like I said, at number 4. But again, this is still a cheap game. You can get the original trilogy on the PlayStation. You can get all 3 games for less than like $40. So what are you waiting for? If you haven't gotten Siphon Filter, if you haven't played it, this is a game in particular, the first one, that I still think holds up today. So if you haven't played Siphon Filter, definitely play that. Okay, getting really serious with the top 3 now, and we mentioned stealth action games. I like stealth action games. 1998, when we got our PlayStation 2 or PlayStation 1, that was the year as the Tenshi series, Metal Gear Solid, and Thief all came out within a couple of months of each other, and then all of a sudden stealth action was in. Now the Tenshi series in particular, I love that series. It's one of my favorite series of all time, and the reason why I like Tenshi is because it really made you feel like a ninja. We talked about Ninja Shadow of Darkness, fantastic game, but I mean, you didn't fight like I thought a ninja would fight in that game, and so Tenshi definitely fit the bill in that. And going on with our third pick, or our top 3 pick, we got to talk about Tenshi II, which in my opinion to this day is still the best game in the series for a bunch of reasons. And in this one, I mean, improvements all around from the first game, whether it was with the graphics and the sound, the level design, all of that. You got a fantastic arsenal of different ninja style weapons. Like I mentioned, this game is more stealth action, so while you can fight, in a scenario where you're taking on a couple of enemies at a time, really sneaking up on opponents and dispatching them in one cinematic move is the way to go. You play as characters like Rikimaru, Ayame, and then Tatsumaru, who's still, in my opinion, the coolest character in the series. You play as them as they are in this kind of feudal dispute with a warring clan, and they're the main bad guy in this. I can't remember her name. Kagami is her name. She really wants to make the world, make it a world where ninja rule. She's tired of ninjas kind of hiding in the shadows, fighting and dying for their feudal lords with no kind of recognition. So she wants to, basically do a power grab over the samurai class of warriors and install ninja as the premier warriors and leaders of the land. So you kind of go through that whole, struggle there. Again, the gameplay is absolutely fantastic. I love the stealth combat in this game. The AI works really well in this, so I mean, you can attract enemies with sight and sound, and you can use that to your advantage and manipulate enemies to go to specific places and go where you want, so you can separate them from their group and dispatch them, all on their own. Again, just a lot to love about this game. If you played the Tenshi series, you know what I'm talking about. In my opinion, the best game in the series, and that's why it's top 3 on the PlayStation 1. Okay, moving on to number 2 on the list, and this is a awesome action RPG from the good folks at Capcom, and this is also one of the games on my list that need a sequel more than any other game in existence. This left me on the cliffhanger that I'm still jonesing from, 2001. I still need to see this story complete. This is the story of Mega Man Legends 2. And, Mega Man Legends and Mega Man Legends 64 were out. This is the best game in the series. Again, technical improvements all around. The graphics are much better. The story is much more expansive, and it goes deeper into the lore that they are creating in this world of endless water. And so you play as Mega Man, and it starts off easy enough, just searching for refractors to power your ship and to power the world. It spins out of control, and this whole thing about Mega Man being a part of the ancient race of beings who had basically invented humans, so basically a race of gods, and it opens up into some crazy places. But from a gameplay standpoint, it's some good old Mega Man action. And you got your Buster Rifle. You also get a ton of different sub weapons that you can build by finding parts throughout your travels in the world. And this game is kind of a semi-open world concept where you have an world map that you'll fly to island. You'll fly to place, and from there you can visit cities and towns and underground caverns where you do most of your combat, and just watch the story unfold in this fantastic land. We did get another game, the Adventures of Tron Bond, which I think is still like one of the most expensive games in the US set. This game is unfortunately expensive as well. It's hovering around 150 bucks these days, but honestly I do think it's worth it, which is crazy for me to say. But Mega Man Legends 2, absolutely fantastic. It ended on, like I said, on a crazy cliffhanger that we still need resolution to. I need to see what happens next. Basically, yeah, I'm not going to spoil the ending for you, but you know, definitely this is one of my favorite games. I've played it over and over again through the years, and that's why it's number 2. All right, and going on to number 1 on the list, my absolute favorite game on the PlayStation is probably not a surprise to any of you if you guys have been following me on this channel. This is the game that introduced me to the stealth action genre, the game that, you know, really pushed the limits of what a cinematic experience could be with video games, the game that taught us that love can indeed bloom on the battlefield. I'm talking about the fantastic Metal Gear Solid, and this is the game that really introduced me to the series. Metal Gear had been a thing since 1987, and Hideo Kojima was working on the MX2 systems of computers, and so we had a you know, a non-canon but still okay game, Metal Gear Solid Snake's Revenge on the NES. But this is the game that really brought me into the world of stealth action. You play as Solid Snake. By this time he's a veteran and a legend in the Black Ops world. He's sent to Shadow Moses Island to deal with a terrorist attack. They've captured the island and have control of several nukes, and say unless they get the remains of Big Boss's, unless they get Big Boss's remains and $30 billion, they will launch the nukes, and yada yada yada. You are sent in to, you know, capture the prisoners and to stop them if they actually do have the ability to launch a nuke. This game, the story is legendary. Again, a fantastic cast of characters, some really cool plot twists and turns throughout. The enemy AI in this is fantastic, reacting to sight and sound. They will see things like footprints and follow footprints. You can knock on walls to get enemies to follow that sound and kind of separate enemies again from their group, where you can attack them with a slew of different weapons. You can also go hand to hand. You can grab them and snap necks, or you can just, you know, kung fu them until they die. Again, ton of great weapons in this. There's not enough good things I can say about this. On the PlayStation 1, it's pretty much as close as you can get to a perfect game. Like, it really is. And the story and the gameplay, the combat, all of it, it still holds up. You know, 25 years later, this is still, in my opinion, the best game on the PlayStation. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I'm sure most of you have played this game. If you haven't played this game, play the remake on the GameCube, you know, the Twin Snakes. Get it in any kind of, just get it however you can. Again, this is the best game on the PlayStation and definitely one of my favorite video games of all time. Alright guys, I do believe that's all I got for you, but let's talk about it in the comment section below. Questions, comments, concerns, threats. What are some of your favorite games on the PlayStation 1? I know that there are a lot of other games I wanted to talk about. Final Fantasy series, great racers like Gran Turismo and Rallycross and things like that. There's just a lot of good stuff on the PlayStation 2. With a library of over 2,500 games, it's really hard to narrow it down to 10. So we did our best. But if you like this content, go ahead, hit that like button and subscribe. If you haven't done so already, you'll be glad you did. I do believe that's all I got for you. Lightsaber Samurai out. Peace.